I will talk to you of art.
Yes.
For there is nothing else.
Are you all ready to join me today on our trip to outer space?
Come along quietly or not.
You can have all the talent in the world and never get anywhere.
Some artist will bait a hook and let you bite upon it.
And now, without further ado,
People would add revolution, would add political, social, and economical change. Be a part of America.
I can say it in one word, brother.
Politics. Thank you.
Politics.
I'll be a Democrat every now and then. I'll be a Muslim, I'll be a Panther. But I'm always being black.
Hey, look, I'm not prejudiced because some of my best friends are colored, if you know what I'm talking about.
If black is beautiful, white is divine. Now that nigga's crazy.
All right, folks, it's Albert Shivers. This is another episode of Planet Shivers. We're gonna to use a Bob Weir expression. We're gonna go in the Wayback Machine with my buddy David Corino, who friends by awkwardly being paired together in math class. So thanks so much for doing this show, Dave.
Yeah, not a problem, Albert. Thanks for having me in consideration for it. So 13 going on 14 years. Just friends, one of my oldest and most dearest friends from high school. So our introduction with each other, we were in Mr. Ball's math class. Yeah. And I don't know if you remember, but the math class was all the kids in our grade that weren't quite good at math. Yeah. And then the kids in the grade above us who weren't quite good at math are retaking the math class we were in. And it wasn't remedial, but what was it, like introduction to algebra? It was like a very
consumer math.
Yeah,
like we were filling out checks.
Like consumer math, like how are you kind of blew me away that there was like a group of kids in the grade above us that were redoing consumer math.
Yeah, that's a class you have to try. Like it takes effort to fail it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we're filling out checks, making budgets. All like useful information. Yeah, it's good, but like
basic math.
Yeah, you shouldn't fail it.
Yeah, third grader could have done it.
Did you have consumer math too?
No, thank God I didn't.
Because that was just it was mind numbing. Yeah. Because like, what are you gonna do? Like, what else are you gonna do?
Remember Mr. Ball and how dry and bland and how just Northeast Pennsylvania. He
wore sweaters with deer on them. That's Northeast Pennsylvania.
Great guy, really friendly. But, of course you have to say that after you burn someone. Like, super bland, but he was a gentleman.
I remember, because my sister's Little League, they were friends with the Balls.
Okay.
And I remember one day, you came over to hang out with me, and Mr. Ball was over my parents' house. It was the weirdest thing.
That's funny.
It was just worlds colliding.
Yeah, and I believe he was the JV girls tennis coach.
Yeah, and didn't he coach soccer too?
Yeah. Anyway, so
this whole thing just gonna be about Mr. Ball.
Yeah, right. So the day when we were forced to
work together.
So I believe there's like maybe 22, 24 kids in the class.
We sat I was right ahead of you and you were right behind me.
Yeah, exactly. And we had to do, he handed out some worksheets and he's like, all right, everyone, choose a partner, I want everyone to have someone they're doing this with and, go through the worksheets at the end of class, turn them in. And there's an even amount of students. Mm-hmm. So you couldn't just be the odd person I'm just going to go it alone like you and I would have preferred to have done. Mm-hmm. And so everyone gets together, everyone puts their desks, next to each other. We got Albert in front of me, I'm behind him, and we're both looking down, doing our work, knowing that the other one doesn't have a partner. And we're just praying that our teacher, Mr. Ball, isn't going to force us to work together. And sure enough, he gets up from his desk, he's walking down the aisle to us, and we both kind of look up, no. Both look down. And he's like, oh, Albert, and it's like, hey, David, neither one of you have partners, so how about you guys work together? And there's an indifferent gasp that you can hear from both of us, all right. Sir Albert, pulls his desk back, I slug mine forward, we're just hanging out, arms crossed.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, kind of scoping each other out. And I believe you were wearing a black Jimi Hendrix shirt where it has his face. You gave it to me last time we hung out as this shirt, black shirt with like a white outline of Jimi Hendrix's face on the entirety of the shirt. Do you remember that shirt?
I do remember that shirt.
And I think you were wearing it that day.
No.
You weren't? You actually remember what you were wearing?
I do remember what I was wearing.
Okay, what was it?
It was a brown Bob Dylan shirt that I got from a show I seen him at.
Okay.
And
all right.
You were into Dylan.
Yeah.
So you made like a nice comment about the shirt or asked me like, "You're into Dylan, or are you into Dylan?" And like that was basically the moment. I was like, "Yeah, I am." And then it's like we found this common ground that just worked.
Yeah, it's like, all right, you're into Dylan. Yeah, I'm into Dylan. I was like, oh, you like Hendrix? Yeah, I like Hendrix. Oh, Beatles. Yeah, so we had like the common musical ground.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, you like the Dead? It's like, not really. It's like, oh, you like Zappa? I was like, yeah, heard of Zappa. That's about it. So, you know, we're doing the math problems, the consumer math problems.
It was like, I was at my like, just about to be on like my Zappa peak at that point.
All right, good to know that.
Yeah.
But yeah, at that moment, you know, the little seedling of friendship had been planted. Mm-hmm. And what really made it grow was, you know, we're talking, you play guitar, I play drums. I was like, hey, you know, we should play music. And lo and behold, Albert came over one day in the room that we're sitting right now. Before it was totally finished, it was just a framed room in the upstairs of our house. No paint, no drywall, nothing, just windows and a little bit of electricity. I had my drum set up there. And yeah, you came over with your guitar, played Railroad Boy by Woody Guthrie, but the Dylan version, as you reminded me earlier. I believe we played Tangled Up in Blue.
We did.
Classic.
We played a few songs off John Wesley Harding.
Yeah.
And that was the first repertoire. And I think later, like, we got together early. And then later on that day, other people came over and joined in.
Yeah. Justin.
Both Justins.
Yeah, Justin Moran came over with his electric, and Justin Soyson came over, and we had like a full band we can jam with.
Right.
And that only, that didn't last too long.
It didn't, like, so that had blown my mind that day, though. Because I never played with, like, that many people at once before that. And, like, I was, like, on cloud nine. I was like, this is amazing. Like, there's drums and a bass.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
From what I remember, it sounded pretty good.
Yeah, it sounded good.
But, yeah, I feel like pretty consistently on the weekends, you'd come over on a Friday or Saturday.
Yep.
And we would just jam for, a couple hours. Eat dinner, hang out, listen to music. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was like the bond.
Yep.
Then
we started, going to shows together.
Yeah. Furthur was... Oh, no, first we saw...
We seen some Dead, like...
Yeah, it was the Dead
Warren Haynes.
Yeah, with Warren Haynes. Wow. They only did a couple tours with Warren Haynes, and like the 09 one was like their summer tour that they did before Furthur became a thing. Yeah, that was fun because we were old enough to really love and appreciate the music, but we weren't too old where because a lot of people are like, especially in the jam scene, especially the Grateful Dead, are very vocal with the likes and dislikes. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely people that weren't on board with Warren Haynes playing with the Dead at that time.
Right.
Same with people that think it's a joke that John Mayer is playing with Dead and Company, but the fact is, we were there and like we got to see Dead music with 4 remaining members of the Dead, and that was the greatest thing ever. Like, my god, like we get to see this. Like it was
the show we went to was with Bram from Marsalis was there too.
Yeah,
that was
out of left field.
Yeah,
he comes on the second song in the first set, and I played with him the whole show. And it's like, it was incredible.
Yeah.
And they don't really do sit-ins that often, so just the fact that Brent from Marsalis was like in the area.
Yeah, and we experienced a few sit-ins in all those shows like over the years.
Yeah, but nothing like quite to that magnitude.
No, that one was pretty awesome.
Yeah, because I remember the birthday show we went to at Best Buy in New York City in 2011. Warren Haynes actually sat in for the entirety of the second set because that was in March, and the Allman Brothers used to do like the 2-week residency at the Beacon Theater every March,
right?
And that was like an off night because they would do like 2 nights off night, 3 nights in a row, have an off night. And yeah, that night the Allman Brothers weren't playing, so Warren Haynes came out and did the entirety of the second set. That was really cool. Yeah, so just getting to travel around and see music, especially Grateful Dead music, you know, it's like very great way to build a friendship.
It's that whole thing was like its own universe. And I tell people who either aren't into the Dead or just don't know much about it, like, if not for those guys, so now it was Furthur by the time I was into it with you really heavy.
Yeah.
Those guys got me to see the country.
Yeah.
Like, that, like, they did, that was like this gift that I wasn't even, like, expecting, but it happened. Like, I've been to Maine, been to Frisco, all these places.
Yeah, all the places in between too. Just like getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, to me that was like the initial, because you know, like we had always loved it for the music, and people go to the shows for all sorts of reasons, especially when you get like a crowd of 20,000 people. All sorts of people go to concerts for a lot of different reasons, but there's definitely the core group of people that go there for the music, and that was the initial love was like, man, this is like timeless, incredible, and the fact that like we get to see it witnessed by the guys that were there. But what also made it so magical was, you know, hopping in a car and driving, you know, 10 hours, you know, to go up to Maine, and then, you know, shows in between, and just getting to see parts of the country that you would never think to go to.
Right.
And that was probably one of the best parts. And just the overall experience. And really just being there and just like enjoying it for what it is and not being too what's the word? Just like too critical of the music, of the players, you know, just like enjoying it.
Yeah, just the whole scene, you know, it was hard like to not find something interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether you know, most of the time it was the music, but other times it was just like people watching.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, like, it's endless. Endless.
Yeah, and it's great too because I feel like Furthur came around at a really good time because they toured for like I think 5 or 6 years, and that really opened up the Dead music to a whole generation of younger fans that maybe weren't quite old enough to see like the Dead with Warren Haynes, certainly weren't old enough to see any shows with Jerry.
Right.
So it's kind of like the mystique and the lore of like the Grateful Dead, you know, the godfathers of the jam band music scene.
Right. And
members that are still alive doing it. So that was, you know, we got a little taste of the nectar of like, of being able to see that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And, you know, like, there were, when you get into the culture of it, every musician like is their own character.
Yeah.
And who has their favorites and who, you know, what side of the stage you're gonna stand on. You're gonna be on Bob's side or Phil's side.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, this whole thing.
The Phil zone.
Which was just like that only added to it.
Yeah.
You know, because with every one of those levels, it became more than just like a concert.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
Where you're sitting and you're enjoying the music, but it was immersive. Furthur was very immersive.
Yeah. And two, it opened up a whole new treasure trove of musicians. Like, I had no idea who Joe Russo was. Mm-hmm. Turns out he's one of the best drummers alive currently. Like, yeah, like what he's doing on the drums is far beyond like what a lot of musicians have done like within the jam band scene as far as like breaking down barriers and just being able to like kind of like reinvent the instrument. John Coltrane, never heard of him. Never
he was the keyboardist, right?
No, he's a guitar player.
Okay.
Yeah, Jeff Kameny was the keyboard player. And it was just cool to see them like kind of rise and like kind of get their moment to shine within that music. And then once Furthur ended, you know, Joe Russo's almost dead. John Kadlecek, his solo career, you know, he's doing his things, like, but he definitely gained a lot more notoriety because he was in Dark Star Orchestra before that. And then Jeff Kameni's just been Bob Weir's right-hand man on the keys since the inception of Rat Dog, I believe in 96 or 97. So he's just been along for the ride as like every reincarnation of the Grateful Dead as their keyboarder.
Right.
And man, that he can play. Yeah. I love his style. It's like, you know, black cut-off jean shorts, black t-shirt, black high-top Converse, just doing his thing. It's something else.
Yeah, and he was always... I watched him a lot at shows because he was always usually on the Bob side. Mm-hmm. So I was usually on the Bob side. So I'd see him and I'd, you know, see both of them back and would always watch them. Like, I got really into like just watching them play. You know?
Yeah, because it's intricate, you know? Like, yeah.
Bob Weir is all over the neck of that guitar.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting too because... Yeah, Bob Weir, I believe one of his biggest influences was McCoy Tyner. Okay. You know, who's like, you know, legendary jazz piano player. Yeah. So it's just kind of cool to see, like the jazz influence, a piano player influencing a rock guitarist, you know, just on like the way he, you know, just like chords and versions of that and like even like playing rhythm on his guitar was like, you know, huge influence from the way McCoy Tyner played. So it's kind of cool to see just like the jazz influence within the Grateful Dead. And yeah, that's something I wanted to talk about. It's just like the influence of like jazz and blues in early rock and roll from like the 60s through the 70s and kind of where it's ended up today as far as like what music is today. Because, you know, if you think of like a lot of the rock bands from the 60s, I think about the drummers like John Densmore from The Doors and Mitch Mitchell from Jimi Hendrix Experience. They were, if you listen to their playing, like big on jazz. Like, major influences were the big jazz players of the time. And it's cool to see how jazz music was like bridging the gap with blues to help create, you know, because rock and roll had been around. Like Buddy Holly and, you know, Chuck Berry and Elvis and all that, but it's like, you know, like it had been around, but like once the jazz era from the 60s, which was kind of like starting to like morph into like a more of a rock influence, it's kind of cool to see like the two melding together. Yeah, like Mickey Hart and Billy Kreutzmann of the Dead, they met at a Count Basie show in like 1968.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so like that's how so he had met Mickey, I think Billy had met Mickey like I think through like a friend or whatever, and then like Mickey like went down to the show and like, you know, they chummed up because they're drummers, and Mickey came from like a very heavily like jazz influence, and Billy Kreutzmann is more just like soul and R&B, but you know, the common ground Count Basie. Yeah. And then, yeah, from there, you know, befriended Billy and then became part of the Dead. Yeah. Which is, you know, it's cool to think, like, even back then, people were, like, meeting through music and just, you know, seeing what happens.
I think, like, with jazz and rock of the 60s, I feel like they started together back in the 40s when rock first started to become a thing, and it branched off of jazz and blues, and then in the 60s it met back up again. Yeah, like they did their own thing for a decade and then they came back. Yeah. Because yeah, like as you know, like one of my all-time favorite artists, a lot of people's all-time favorite artists, Miles Davis. To me, I feel like he definitely was a jazz artist who was kind of embracing rock and roll a lot more than other artists from his day, because he was very much like very prophetic in his music.
And if you look at like the movement of his music from the 60s, that was with like, you know, what was considered like his second great quintet with it was Tony Williams on drums. He was a young kid, like I think he was 19 when he joined Miles Davis's band. Ron Carter on bass, Herbie Hancock on piano, acoustic piano, and then Wayne Shorter on tenor saxophone. And that was considered Miles Davis's like last fully acoustic album. Mm-hmm. You know, without like electric bass or like electric keyboards or anything.
Right.
And if you listen to it, you can definitely hear like the rock and roll influence of like 66 and 67 like slowly seeping into it, but it's like very much jazz, but it has like a bit of a more like a little more of an edge than like previous albums, and even more of an edge than like what was being released at the time. And yeah, that band he was playing with, incredible musicians.
Yeah.
So young too, and it's like, man, when you listen to like Herbie Hancock, absolute legend, you know, Wayne Shorter, all those guys, like very influential 60s, 70s and beyond.
And Herbie Hancock played with Miles through most of that evolution.
Yeah, yeah.
Like he stuck with him.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Bitches Brew and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Man, Bitches Brew. So my first introduction to Miles Davis, and then anyone like that, like Dave Holland, who played bass, Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock. I believe Tony Williams was on that album. That was like my introduction to all that, because I had known about jazz, and I had one jazz album, which was Coltrane's.
What did the cover look like?
It was just a photo of Coltrane playing saxophone. I believe the album was like from 65 or 66.
Was My Favorite Things on it?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm Old Fashioned was on it, and I think I forget the name of it. I just remember Philly Joe Jones was the drummer on this particular album that I'm thinking of. But that was my introduction, like very good jazz, but like nothing like Bitches Brew.
Right.
And my brother, for my 16th birthday, he was like, "Hey, you should ask Mom and Dad to get you the Bitches Brew CD." And I was 16, 15 at the time, impressionable. I'm like, "Well, Bitches Brew sounds cool. Like, yeah, why not? Like, whatever." Asked for it. My parents actually got it for me. And the artwork is just something to behold. At that age, too, it's like, oh my God, like, what is this? You know, it's a 2-disc CD. I put it in the CD player, and then I can't recall what the opening track is, but there's like, you know, so many musicians, and it's so loud. Just, you know, your senses are being assaulted. Like 2 drummers, 2 keyboard players.
There were a lot of times in that period that Miles would just like, a song would just be like, it almost sounds like you missed something.
Yeah.
Like his songs would just like be silent and
yeah.
It's like, did this CD skip or something?
Yeah, exactly. And then a lot of the times too, it's like Miles won't even come in until like 4 or 5 minutes into the track.
Right.
So it's like the band is just jamming, and then he shows up like, "Oh, cool, we're jamming. You know, let me plug in." But yeah, just like 2 drummers, 2 percussionists, 2 keyboards going at once. Dave Holland, who played electric bass, who was with Miles through his psychedelic period. Then, yeah, Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock. It's just so much going on. And it blew me away because I never heard music like that before. And to me, like, it seems like that was like the leap from straight ahead jazz music to like embracing rock and roll, then having like a lot of funk elements, and then like the main thing, like improvisation.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that album was groundbreaking. And then, you know, I believe Tribute to Jack Johnson was after that one, which was more stripped down. I think there's only like 4 or 5 musicians on that one, with John McLaughlin on guitar. And then after that is On the Corner. Remember that album?
And that's where, like, I like Bitches Brew, but that's where like my interest was really peaked. Was the run of 3 albums of On the Corner, Live Evil, and Live at the Fillmore.
Yeah.
Because they were like, they were a little bit less abstract musically than Bitches Brew was, and I feel like even more funky.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, with just like heavy, muddy, like wet funk.
Yeah,
and it was so good. Like I listened to On the Corner a lot.
Wow.
Like, a lot.
Because that's a hard one for a lot of people to digest because it's so aggressive just in the groove.
It is.
It's aggressive, but the bass and drums are so repetitive, like it really anchors the entire album. And yeah, like I know a lot of hip hop artists have like sampled musical excerpts from that specific album. So yeah, it's like it's fascinating how groundbreaking an album like that came out in, I believe, 72.
Yeah.
Which, you know, there's a lot of experimentation going on in music even then, but that was Miles just being ahead of the curve and just going for it. Yeah.
I recently watched so Miles Davis had a wife. He had many wives, but one of the wives was this woman Betty, who was then Betty Davis. So she gets buried by the real, like not the real, but like the more popular actress Betty Davis.
Okay.
But he helped her career a whole bunch, and she did 2 albums that are like so funky it hurts. Like right in there with him, but just like, what's going on? This is so funky.
What did she play?
She didn't play anything. She just sang.
Wow.
But I'll play you some of the music when we're done.
Okay.
But yeah, she had an album called They Say I'm Different, and one just called Betty Davis.
Okay.
And I was at a record store in Allentown, and they had like a compilation of the 2 albums on like a single LP, like the best of each one. And on the cover, she's like in this crazy outfit on a motorcycle. And the record was like, you know, it was a new record a couple of years ago, so it's like $30. And,
so it was a reissue.
Yeah, it was a reissue. Yeah.
Wow, because you know you got to think a lot of the records from back then, unless they're really popular, don't get reissued.
Yeah, they were not. I mean, she's had a resurgence.
Okay.
But the original records, which I was able to find, are like hen's teeth. But I had no clue who she was. I see this picture, this crazy chick, big afro, dressed crazy on this big motorcycle. I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I need it.
Yeah.
Like if she's making the music, or is at least in control of making the music, and Miles like was the producer.
Wow. Of
her original recordings.
So I'm sure you saw that and just jaw drop, like, all right.
I didn't even know that at first. I just, I was like, that's crazy. And when I got it home, and I put it on, and I started like reading the liner notes of the record, that's when it got into like her affiliation with Miles, and Davis is from Miles Davis.
Yeah.
All like the influence that he had to her career. And it's like said, like folklorically, that it was Betty that helped to push Miles in the direction of psychedelic and electric, and like she was part of that shift for him.
Yeah, I mean, she probably had an outside perspective of noticing the trend in the wave, and like, all right, like you've been able to stay relevant this long in your career, let's maybe tweak it a little bit and start doing, even more experimental music. Because
like before she married Miles, she was hanging out with Hendrix and like some other like 60s groups, mainly Hendrix. Yeah. And she was like a groupie for those guys. Mm-hmm. Then met Miles and then kind of almost like brought the two together.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, so okay. So maybe that's how Miles knew Hendrix, because for Bitches Brew, Miles wanted Jimi Hendrix to perform on the album. But for whatever reason, maybe scheduling conflict, maybe there was like a tour going on that Jimmy couldn't do, maybe he was already booked up in his own studio. But originally Miles Davis wanted Jimi Hendrix on Bitches Brew, which would have been, the magnitude of that album's popularity would have gone through the roof.
Yeah.
Like imagine that. But, it gave room for John McLaughlin to like hop on board, and his performance on those albums was spectacular. But I don't want to detract too far from what you're saying, but it's just an interesting like connection.
Yeah, and that could have been the I didn't know that about Hendrix. Yeah, that would have been crazy.
Yeah, go figure.
There's this other story that like Jimi Hendrix was approached by Zappa, and Zappa told him that Frank Zappa wanted to score Jimi Hendrix guitar solos for an orchestra.
Whoa.
And Jimmy was like, I don't want you to do that. No.
Yeah.
And Zappa was like, and Zappa was kind of a grudge holder, but and he would like bring up in interviews like, I wish you would have did it. It would have been great. I wish you would have did it. But that would have been interesting because he scored Jimmy Page's guitar solo of oh my God, Stairway to Heaven. Yeah, Stairway to Heaven.
I thought you were gonna say Subway to Heaven.
I almost did.
So when did he do that in the 70s?
He did that in the 80s.
Okay.
His band, which was like his last big band, did a version of Stairway to Heaven. Wow. In which
was it all instrumental?
Mostly. Ike Willis does some vocals.
Okay.
But he does score the guitar solo. It's played by the horn section, which is amazing. It blows me away every time.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's another thing you should play for me after this.
Awesome.
But yeah, I just wanted to comment on how you're reading the liner notes of that album.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually, I was in the car today, and since I've been back home, I've been going back through all my old CDs, and driving back and forth from Connecticut, have been playing a lot of CDs I haven't listened to in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I loved when I first used to buy music was actually getting the CD or the album, and just, especially if it's a reissue, just opening up and like reading the booklet that comes with it, because it really gives you a really unique insight to any band that you're listening to, like for that period.
Right. And
it's cool because you can see like, who wrote the song, who's on the tracks, like who produced it, where it was mastered, and like that album you were speaking of, found out Miles Davis produced it. Right. And then, reading the inside history on that. And then back to Bitches Brew, I just remember reading the booklet for the first time and just like seeing all these musicians I've never heard of. But that's how I got into them, like eventually started listening to Herbie Hancock, started listening to Dave Holland, and just, like that before internet was like a great way to get exposed to new music. But yeah, that's the only comment I wanted to make on that.
No, it's definitely true though, and I think that it enhances the listening of the album, like knowing how it's made, the backstory of the artist, all that stuff.
Yeah, because when you download a song, you don't get any of that.
No.
It's like, who knows who actually wrote the words, the instrumentation, produced it. So. And
nowadays there are a lot of ghostwriters.
Yeah.
In music, so like there's these men and women who will write a song, get paid, but not be given the credit. And the credit's given to the person performing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get to, not to be like grumpy, like then they get to like say like, I wrote it.
Yeah.
And I won't name names because I'm not totally sure who's doing it and who's not. So I don't want to like get anybody pissed off.
Yeah, you don't want to get an angry email.
But there are artists out there who are like singer-songwriter, but then there's like some folks in a room somewhere in an office.
Yeah, very. Well, that also goes back to I believe it was 1960s New York City, Tin Pan Alley.
Oh yeah.
Where there was like office buildings of people writing folk songs and just like essentially selling the songs to the artist.
Right, and that existed like think of all the jazz standards, that survived from like the 20s up through the 50s. Stormy Weather, All of Me, all these songs.
Yeah.
That were just written by dudes in suits and then handed to, and then like what's his name? Well, Carole King and the guy who had seen Fire and Rain.
You might have to look that one up.
Okay. He went on to a solo career, but he was a songwriter too. And they both, like Carole King went on to be famous singing her own songs.
Yeah.
But she was writing songs for like Motown groups. She wrote Heatwave for Martha and the Vandellas.
Oh wow. Okay.
But there she was.
Yeah.
Oh, that dude's name is gonna bug me, because you know who he is too. James Taylor.
Of course.
Yeah, had one of those jobs writing songs.
Really?
He wrote songs for like that the Drifters did.
Okay.
And like other like, this is like post doo-wop, early Motown.
So even before he had his own actual career,
yeah.
like that was his foot in the door.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he went solo. And Willie Nelson was the same thing a generation before.
Okay.
He wrote the song Crazy that Patsy Cline made famous.
Yeah.
So he was songwriting because he was told he was too ugly.
Well, he proved them wrong.
He certainly did.
But James Taylor, Willie Nelson, like they were still actual musicians.
Yeah.
So they can like write the melody and like actually write a good song.
Right.
And have it be a good song.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was watching this video about and I don't know the guy's name, but there's this one Swedish writer who has written like top 40, top 20, top 10 hits for like Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, Beyonce, Miley Cyrus, Justin Bieber, like any musician that's been in the top 40 the past 2 decades. There's a good chance he wrote a song that got them famous or propelled their career even more. And, this guy's like a multi-millionaire.
Right.
Nobody knows his name, but he's figured out the formula for like the modern day pop song where he just knows what to write, how to write it. He's probably recycled the same chord progression hundreds of times over. Maybe just like rearrange the chords or whatever. And yeah, multi-millionaire, has written more songs than you can count for all these artists, and it just blows me away.
Yeah.
It's like this guy nobody's ever heard of, and he's written more top 10 hits than most musicians have, like actual musicians. Right. The progression of music has been really interesting, so to say, because I think that's why I gravitate towards the 60s and 70s, because it's so close to like the roots of blues and jazz, where you can just hear it in the instrumentation, like that influence is there. Then like as the 80s evolved and became its own thing, its own sound, like it gets further and like each decade it gets further and further away from that root, and then not to dismay modern day music, but it's definitely its own beast compared to what was going on 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah, and there's a lot of factors for that, probably.
Yeah.
As not only like the evolution of music, but like more technology and just,
Yeah, compression, auto-tune. Yeah, a lot of things can go into making a record sound like good and clean.
Yeah.
When, I definitely can appreciate that, but I definitely like the aspect of like live in studio recordings with like minimal overdubbing and just that raw, passionate sound.
And like think about the 20s when that's always how it was done. There was one microphone with a gigantic like tube attached to it.
Yeah.
And you had like the guys who would be doing the recordings, the engineers, would have to arrange bands. For instance, like they would put Louis Armstrong out in the hallway. He was such a strong trumpeter.
Yeah.
Because like if he was too close to the mic, he would
Just
overpower everybody. So you had to like situate everyone. Like that was your levels.
Yeah.
It was like putting the drummer in the back and putting
So just single track recording then.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
With tape, so you gotta try to get the song done in 1 or 2 takes, or
right,
not using up tape.
A lot of time they would make a master 78 and burn it right from it would record through this tube right into, and just make it a record.
Wow.
Like right there, and then they would take that and then plate it.
Okay.
And then that would be the one that the press that they would use.
Man, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So you had to get it right.
Yeah.
Because studio time was expensive.
Mm-hmm. And it's less accessible too, because it's how many studios were there?
Right. So and most of these bands basically would just take their road show and just bring it in and just do it.
Yeah,
you know? So there was less
road tested, tried and true.
Right.
It's they already knew it.
Exactly. They've been playing these songs for years, so it was easy for them to just go in and go, boop, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
But still, how there really were hardly any chances for second takes.
Yeah. And too, music from that era, even a couple decades before that, going back to the jazz standards you're talking about.
Right.
All the blues standards, all the folk standards, all the bluegrass traditional standard tunes. Those have been songs that have been played, for 50, sometimes 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from Appalachia, then before that, Scotland, Europe.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting. It's tracing back all these old songs, and the original writer, the original people that played it, it's just kind of just a word of mouth, teach someone a song, now they know it, then, it just goes down the line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, recorded music, it's definitely plays a huge role in just society and culture in general.
Yeah, and there were artists of the 20s, mainly jazz and blues artists, who didn't want to record. Country musicians too. But they didn't want to record. They're like, this is stupid. Why do I want to do this? They wouldn't make as much money as they would playing live.
Yeah.
And they, especially the black musicians, really didn't trust it. Because, here comes 2 white guys in a suit. Telling you it's I don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe they'd have, the one patsy, black guy just to make everybody comfortable.
Yeah, right.
So there was, constantly, there was a big distrust amongst musicians.
Rightfully so, it's your art. You don't want someone coming out who has a business degree trying to tell you what to do and how to do it.
Yeah. Because, and then we'll move on, but Bessie Smith was singing, for a long time, but she didn't make her recordings until fairly late in life, or at least the popular recordings.
Yeah.
Fairly late in life. And it was Columbia that finally coerced her into it.
Wow.
And by that point, amongst musicians, she was legendary. So she had talk about if Hendrix would have played on Miles Davis's record. Bessie Smith had Louis Armstrong backing her, Benny Goodman backing her. The biggest musicians of that day were pushing each other out of the way to be able to back Bessie Smith.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty cool story, and imagine being there for that.
Yeah, right.
Who's who of musicians.
Yeah, and not even knowing that you're witnessing that history. It's just it's just what's happening.
Yeah. It's one thing I wanted to, in the line of Furthur, kind of just talk about with you and see how you remember it, was that first run we went on, or I should say the first run I went on with you guys, was Herkimer, New York, Oxford, Maine for the Nativa Festival.
Yeah.
Where I first seen George Clinton live, which planted a seed in me. Forget about it.
Yeah, that was a smoking show.
Yeah.
That was really
4th of July. That was Then we were supposed to go. Was it Vermont or New Hampshire?
So the next show after that was Vermont, but the town, I think it was Shelby, Vermont. The town had to cancel the show because they didn't have the infrastructure to support such a such a large event happening.
Right.
So a week before the show, they had to cancel it, and then they rescheduled it for the Sherman Theater in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, of all places.
Of all places, so it's right in my backyard.
Yeah.
And it was like an invasion.
Yeah.
It really, the Sherman probably wasn't big enough
No, they had no idea what was about to hit
They
the town.
had no clue.
Yeah,
It was
Main
like-
Street was damn near shut down.
Yeah, it was like the weatherman who like really undersells a hurricane.
Yeah, projects like, 10% chance of rain, and it's like
Right.
raining for a week.
Right. Because it was just overrun. Like, there was nothing anybody could do. For one night, Strasbourg just belonged to the fans of Furthur.
Yeah.
I remember
And all the fans that couldn't get into the show.
Yeah.
All the people just hanging out.
Which were a lot of them.
Yeah. Probably in the thousands, because that was a pretty, that tour, they were mainly in the Northeast, and so they were hitting towns that were, like, very close to each other. So there were a lot of people doing the whole tour.
Yeah.
But they get from Maine down to Strasbourg was about an 8-hour drive.
Yeah.
But there was definitely a lot of people that just kind of pit stopped there, even if they didn't have a ticket to get in. But that was incredible, because that was probably one of the smallest venues they had played as a band. And didn't, because it was hot that night. It was humid in the venue, and didn't the paint...
I was just gonna say, the paint was coming off of the floor and was stuck to my shoes. I'm sure other people too.
Yeah, that was...
And just sweaty people.
Yeah.
Bumping into me. I got hit in the face by a guy dancing to Fire on the Mountain.
Yeah.
And he was all like just doped up. And he's doing the whole fire, and his hands are up in the air, wiggling his fingers. And he keeps like spinning. And I was a very stoic concert watcher.
Yeah.
And
I remember that.
He just kept like spinning and hitting me. But his eyes were closed. He's like really into it. And I don't want to get mad at this guy. Like, he's enjoying himself. He doesn't even know what he's doing. But he keeps hitting me, so I'm going to move. And that's the show I met Bob Weir at, too.
Yeah, and I'm kicking myself because I remember I was hanging out with you. And you, like, wanted to go in the alley. I was like, I'm going to go up front. Like, we'll just shoot me a text before you go in. And lo and behold, you meet the Bob Weir.
Which was total accident. Like, I had no business being in that alley. Because there was nobody there.
Yeah.
It was just the throngs of people trying to get out the main way. And I was like, screw that. I'm going to go out the side door. It'd be cool. And I just ended up in a place where people weren't supposed to be.
Yeah.
There was these two brawny dudes and Bob Weir just walking. So that was cool.
Yeah, that's probably been the best show in my opinion, to hit the Sherman Theater.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good one. I still, have a soft spot for Herkimer.
Yeah.
Because, that...
The Gelston Castle.
Yeah. That whole thing.
It's a castle.
Yeah.
Yeah, then that night we didn't have, remember we were supposed to link up with my cousin at their campsite, but it's rural upstate New York.
It was closed or something.
No, we all had flip phones. It was 2009.
Right.
Or 2010. But anyway, we had directions how to get there, but we couldn't.
We couldn't find it?
Yeah. Can you pause this?
Oh, yeah. So, all this music we took in back then all started with the fact that you and I both played together. And you stuck with music, been through a couple of different bands. What's going on with your band now?
So we're called Sirius in the Sky, and that's SIRIUS. And yeah, I joined the band back in March, and it consists of 2 guitarists, a lead guitar, and then a rhythm guitarist who goes back and forth between acoustic and electric guitars. Saxophone player, bassist, myself on drums, and female vocalist. And as far as genres go, I feel like it could be put in the category of a little R&B, a little soul, some influences of funk, a little bit of blues, a little bit of jazz, a couple straightforward 70s classic rock songs. So, I just feel like a modern day band is kind of grabbing all sorts of different influences of people that have, bands that have that we look up to for inspiration.
So do you guys have a projected time when you want to be able to play shows and have your EP ready?
So we're gonna take advantage of the winter months, and so right now we have one song that's been fully recorded and mastered. Before we all got together one last time before the Christmas break and all that, and we pretty much have all the tracks done for another one of our songs, Amarillo Flower. That one should be ready and like fully mixed within like the next couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
At least having a solid 4 or 5 tunes ready to go, you know, by the end of the winter time, just like everything mixed and mastered and online. And then by then we're gonna have you know, like start trying to have shows lined up for the spring. And then once summertime hits, that's when we're gonna really want to be just trying to play as much as we can, because you know that's really, because nowadays you can't really make money off of record sales.
Yeah.
So it's really just all about the live performance and your presence and professionality and all that.
Yeah. So I feel like we covered just about everything.
Yeah.
Right? Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm glad we got a chance to talk about your band, and this way people... do you have an online presence as of right now?
So yeah, we just have a Facebook, Serious in the Sky.
Okay.
And yeah, if you look it up, it should be easy enough to find. We have a couple songs on Bandcamp from... I don't know if anyone uses Bandcamp anymore, but we have a couple tunes from like a few months ago that we had put up. But yeah, keep an eye out on Bandcamp and YouTube and Spotify.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this.
All right. Well, yeah, absolute pleasure. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Definitely, Dave. It was fun talking.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Planet Shivers podcast. You can find this episode and more on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, the podcast app, SoundCloud, and on YouTube with video content to go along with it. I'm going to be doing my own art and other people's art as the backgrounds for videos coming up in the future. If you want to see more of my work, you can go on Instagram at Albert Shivers. If you are on Facebook, you can go to Albert Shivers Visual Artist Facebook page. And don't forget to like and subscribe.